A cheating confession, a cup of coffee, and the barista who couldn't stay silent.
The smell of espresso lingered thick in the small cafe, the hiss of the steam wand cutting through the air like a whispering secret. Neon lights flickered outside, casting a sickly green hue on the cracked sidewalk, as rain drummed relentlessly on the windows. Emily, a seasoned barista, wiped the countertop for the third time in an hour, her motions mechanical. Her mind had drifted like it always did through the noise of clinking cups and idle chatter, but today, something felt different. The hum of the espresso machine, usually a comforting rhythm, now seemed a cruel, mocking noise. Her eyes lingered on the corner booth. Two figures, a man and a woman, were in a heated conversation. The man's voice was low, his face flushed with the weight of his words. Emily, without thinking, leaned slightly forward, the polished surface of the counter cold beneath her fingertips. She hadn't meant to overhear, but his words cut through the fog of her mind, sharper than any knife. "I can't keep doing this," he murmured, his voice tight with guilt. "I don't want to be with her anymore. I want you." Her pulse quickened, though her expression remained unchanged. Her life, though a quiet one, had its rules. The most important rule, never get involved. But the universe had other plans. Emily couldn't shake the words from her mind. "I want you." The man had said them so clearly, so decisively, as if there was no turning back. She had heard confessions before: cheating, lying, betrayals of every kind, but this one felt different. It was personal, as if she, too, had been pulled into the chaos. The woman's silence was telling, her face hidden beneath a veil of makeup, but her body language screamed something else, something desperate. Emily's hands trembled as she adjusted the coffee grinder, the mechanical whirring suddenly too loud in the space. She shouldn't have cared. She should have kept her head down, kept serving drinks, kept her distance. But there was something about the woman's posture, the defeat, the fragility that gnawed at her. It wasn't until the man stood up, throwing cash on the table and storming out, that Emily made her move. The woman was still sitting there, staring into the untouched coffee, the steam rising like a ghost. Without thinking, Emily approached, her heart hammering in her chest, though she tried to mask it with a cool smile. "I don't mean to intrude," Emily began, her voice low, "but if you want advice. I'm pretty good at reading people." The woman's gaze snapped up, shock flashing across her face, before it softened into something more complex. Vulnerability. Emily had seen it before in countless customers, people who came to her, seeking comfort in a cup of coffee, not realizing they were craving more. This was different. This was a woman who had been broken. And Emily, for reasons she couldn't explain, felt the pull to fix it. The woman studied Emily for a long moment, her eyes searching for something. "Advice?" she finally asked, her voice hushed, as if the word itself was foreign. Emily nodded, leaning in slightly, though not too close. Her instincts told her to stay cautious. "Advice on what?" the woman asked again, her voice a whisper now. She looked tired, as though she had carried the weight of 1,000 secrets for far too long. Emily could feel it, the gravity of the moment, the shift in her life. "There are things," Emily said slowly, her words deliberate, "things you can't undo. But that doesn't mean you can't move forward." The woman's face tightened, the hurt in her eyes undeniable. "How do you know?" "I don't," Emily admitted, her voice softer now. "But I know that sometimes, it's not about fixing what's broken. It's about figuring out what comes next." The woman's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," Emily replied, her voice steady, even. "But I know you're standing on the edge. You don't have to jump." There was a long pause. The air in the cafe felt heavy now, charged. The woman's lips parted, but she didn't speak, as if her next words could change everything. And perhaps they could. The next morning, Emily arrived at the cafe early, her routine steady, yet her mind unsettled. She had expected the moment with the woman to be just a fleeting encounter, a confession, a soft exchange of words, and then an unspoken agreement to go their separate ways. But the woman she hadn't left. The seat at the corner booth, usually claimed by regulars, was now occupied by the same woman. Her gaze was distant, her fingers circling the rim of her coffee cup, almost absent-mindedly. Emily didn't approach right away, but she couldn't help but observe. The woman was a stranger, yet there was an odd kinship in her solitude, a bond formed by unspoken pain. As the cafe filled with the usual morning crowd, Emily carried on her duties. The scent of fresh coffee, the clatter of mugs, the hum of conversation, it all seemed distant. She kept stealing glances at the woman, who still sat there, unblinking, as if waiting for the world to offer her an answer. Emily had always been a listener, not a talker. But there was something about this woman's presence that demanded more than just passive observation. It pulled at her an itch beneath her skin that she couldn't ignore. Finally, when the cafe quieted and the woman remained, Emily found herself at her side once more. "You came back," Emily said, the words more of an observation than a question. The woman's lips curled into a tight, almost imperceptible smile. "I didn't know where else to go." That was all Emily needed to hear. In that moment, something shifted. The connection wasn't just about a troubled stranger seeking advice anymore. It was personal. Emily could feel it deep in her gut. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was unraveling, something she hadn't yet understood. The woman had returned, yes, but it wasn't the same. She wasn't just sitting in the corner booth anymore, a passive observer of her own life. No, she was leaning into something now, something far darker than Emily could have anticipated. Over the following days, Emily noticed small shifts. The woman was becoming a regular, too regular. She had stopped just sitting in silence. Instead, she began ordering 2 cups of coffee, as if expecting someone else. Yet, no one ever came. Emily watched, a quiet observer of the slow unraveling. Something about her had shifted. She was no longer the same woman who had appeared in the cafe the first time. Her shoulders were hunched, her hands trembling on occasion as she adjusted her cup. Emily had heard rumors, whispers from the regulars that the woman was embroiled in a web of deceit, caught in something far larger than a simple affair. One evening, Emily couldn't ignore the pull any longer. She found herself once again at the woman's table. This time, the woman didn't need an invitation to speak. "You were right," she said, her voice a shadow of the woman Emily had first met. "I've lost everything. And now I'm stuck." Emily tilted her head, the weight of the words heavy in the space between them. "Stuck. I don't know how to fix this." "But you do, don't you?" Her eyes were pleading now, raw with desperation. "You see things others can't." Emily's chest tightened. The woman had come to her for more than just advice now. She was asking for help, for a way out of a situation that seemed to have no easy answer. Emily wasn't in the business of fixing people, but there was something about this woman that made her reconsider. Perhaps it wasn't just about listening anymore. Maybe it was time to act. Emily had thought that offering advice, offering a shoulder to lean on, would be the extent of it. But now, it seemed she had crossed a line she couldn't unstep. She had allowed herself to care, allowed herself to be drawn into a stranger's storm. The woman was no longer just a pitiful figure in the corner booth. She was a reflection of all the things Emily had avoided in her own life: complications, messes, unspoken truths. The next evening, Emily came in to find the woman waiting for her again, this time with a familiar face beside her. The man who had been at the cafe that first day, the one who had confessed to cheating, was sitting across from her, his eyes avoiding Emily's gaze. The moment he noticed Emily, the air seemed to shift. Tension radiated from him. He had been caught by her, by the woman, by whatever invisible web had drawn them all together. Emily could see it now. This wasn't just a simple affair. There was something more lurking beneath the surface, something far more dangerous. And now, Emily was caught in the middle of it. The woman's eyes met hers, guilt and desperation entwined. "I need you to help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Emily didn't know what she was getting herself into, but it was too late to walk away now. The following days felt like a blur. Emily tried to go about her routine, but the threads of the cafe, the soft hum of the espresso machine, the clink of spoons against ceramic cups seemed to mock her. There was a darkness in the air now, an undeniable tension that no amount of coffee could erase. The woman, whose name Emily had finally learned was Sarah, and the man David were regulars now. They sat together often, but there was always a distance between them, a chasm that no words could bridge. Emily had been careful, offering her assistance when Sarah needed it, giving quiet advice when it seemed right. She had no personal stake in their drama, at least, that's what she told herself. But every day, as she observed the two of them, something gnawed at her. There was a depth to this situation that she couldn't understand, and every time she thought she might have a grasp on it, the ground slipped from under her. Then came the night when everything changed. Sarah, her hands trembling more violently than usual, had pulled Emily aside after the cafe had quieted. There was a look in her eyes, one that Emily had seen in others, but never up close. The look of someone on the edge of something dark, someone who had seen too much, too soon. "I need to show you something," Sarah said, her voice shaking. Emily followed her, unsure of where this was going. They stepped outside into the alley behind the cafe. The rain was light, but it cut through the cold, dampening everything it touched. Sarah pulled out an envelope, shaking as she handed it to Emily. "It's all in there," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth." Emily opened the envelope with hesitant hands, her pulse quickening. Inside was a series of photographs, grainy, stolen moments of Sarah and David, yes, but not the kind of photographs Emily had expected. These weren't just images of betrayal. They were images of something far more sinister: meetings with other people, cryptic notes exchanged, and David's face twisted with something darker than guilt. Suddenly, the truth hit her like a freight train. David wasn't just a man caught in an affair. He was part of something far more dangerous, a web of deceit, blackmail, and betrayal that stretched far beyond the confines of the cafe. The moment the realization sunk in, Emily's body went cold. She had been swept into a much larger game than she had ever imagined. Everything Emily had believed about Sarah, about David, about herself, it all collapsed in that instant. The web of lies, the carefully constructed facades, the silence she had tried to maintain, it was all an illusion. And now, the truth was in her hands, stark and undeniable. But with the truth came a terrible choice. Would she walk away, leaving Sarah and David to deal with their own mess, or would she intervene, diving headfirst into a world of danger she had no understanding of? The decision weighed on her like a 1,000-pound stone. She was just a barista, for God's sake. Her life was meant to be simple, quiet, unassuming, safe. Yet here she was, holding the unraveling threads of something far darker than she had ever imagined. That night, Emily found herself unable to sleep. Her mind raced, replaying the images she had seen in those photographs. She tried to rationalize it, tried to convince herself that it was none of her business. But the truth was, she couldn't unsee what she had seen. And Sarah, the woman, had asked for help. No, it was more than that. She had begged for it, but help came with a price. Emily had always avoided conflict, always kept her head down. But now, as the rain pattered against her window, she realized there was no turning back. She had already crossed a line. The moment Emily made her decision, a strange calm overtook her. She would confront David, demand answers, expose the truth, and somehow, find a way to untangle the mess she had found herself in. There was no turning back now. The stakes had become too high. The following day, Emily found herself at the cafe earlier than usual. The quiet hum of the morning was different today. There was a sense of purpose in the air, like the calm before a storm. She couldn't explain it, but her every instinct told her something was about to shift. When David entered, he was his usual self-confident, smug even, but there was a crack in his veneer, a subtle nervousness to his movements. Emily didn't wait. She walked straight up to him, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. "I need answers," she said, her voice low but firm. "About Sarah. About everything." David stiffened, his eyes flashing with something that might have been anger. But there was also fear, a fear Emily had never seen in him before. "Stay out of this, Emily," he warned, his voice low, threatening. But Emily was done listening. The truth had already been set in motion. There was no walking away now. She leaned in closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You're not the only one who can play this game, David. But I will see it through, whatever it takes." The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken threats and the weight of secrets now too big to hide. The night felt heavy, thick with anticipation. Emily sat at the counter of the cafe, absently cleaning a glass she didn't need to clean. The routine of it all was calming, a fragile kind of comfort in the familiar. But tonight was different. Tonight, she knew the stakes had been raised too high for her to turn back. The decision had been made. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The quiet of the cafe, the soft hiss of the espresso machine, and the low murmur of distant conversation felt worlds apart from the storm brewing just beneath the surface. David hadn't come back to the cafe that day after their confrontation. Emily hadn't expected him to. She had seen something in his eyes, the brief flicker of panic that was quickly masked by bravado. He was calculating, but now, it seemed, Emily had forced him into a corner. There was no way he could ignore the truth anymore. And that truth had a cost. But even as the weight of what was to come settled on her, Emily couldn't ignore the pull of a strange, silent connection with Sarah. The woman who had sought her help, the woman who had come to her for advice, was now the one who needed more than just words. The darkness surrounding Sarah was closing in on both of them, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her involvement was no accident. She was trapped in a web, just like Sarah. And as much as she wanted to escape, something kept her tethered. It was a strange kind of calm, this quiet before the storm. Emily allowed herself a single moment of introspection. She could feel the weight of everything that had led her to this point, the whispered confessions, the lies exposed, the silent promise she had made to herself to do what was right. But the world wasn't black and white. It was messy, full of shades of gray that blurred the lines between hero and villain. Emily's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. A text from Sarah, *I need to see you. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was anything but. Tonight, everything would change. The cafe was empty when Sarah arrived, the hum of the city outside seeming to die down with the late hour. She walked in slowly, her face pale, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Emily stood by the counter, waiting, knowing that this was the moment where everything would come to a head. Sarah's presence was like an unspoken challenge, a final test of whether Emily could hold firm in the face of the chaos she had chosen to become part of. "I can't do this alone anymore," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood near the counter, close enough for Emily to see the fear that had replaced the guarded determination she had once worn. "David's not who I thought he was. And now, it's too late to walk away." Emily's gaze softened, but the weight of the situation was clear. "What exactly are you asking of me, Sarah?" she replied, her voice steady but laced with tension. She had known this moment was coming, knew Sarah would need more than advice this time. But was she ready to dive deeper into this world of deceit, or had she already crossed the point of no return? "I need you to help me expose him," Sarah's voice cracked, revealing a fragility that sent a sharp pang through Emily. "I can't do it alone. If I go to the police, he'll destroy me. He's too powerful." Emily's mind raced. There was so much at stake, so much she didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear, the longer she hesitated, the more danger Sarah was in. And the more it seemed like Emily's own life was inextricably tied to the outcome of this confrontation. She took a deep breath, knowing that once she took the next step, there would be no turning back. "All right," Emily said, her voice quiet but resolute. "I'll help you." And in that moment, Emily realized that everything had shifted. No longer was she just a barista, she was now an active participant in a dangerous game of lies, deceit, and blackmail. But there was no turning back now. She had made her choice. As the days passed, the plan took shape. Emily and Sarah met in secret, gathering information, piecing together the fractured puzzle that was David's hidden world. Each step forward brought them deeper into a world of blackmail, corruption, and danger. The more they uncovered, the more Emily realized how much she had underestimated David and the far-reaching consequences of his actions. But with each new revelation, the stakes grew higher. Emily's involvement was no longer a simple case of helping a woman in distress. She had become a part of something much larger, something that threatened not only her own safety but her future. David's influence was far-reaching, and he was beginning to take notice of Emily's meddling. One night, as Emily sat at the counter of the cafe, a shadow fell across her. She looked up to find David standing in front of her, his eyes hard with anger. "You think you can destroy me, Emily?" he growled, his voice low, dangerous. "You have no idea what you're up against." Her heart pounded, but her resolve remained firm. "I'm not trying to destroy you, David. I'm trying to stop you." David's lips curled into a grim smile, one that sent a chill down her spine. "You don't even know what you've gotten yourself into. You can't win." The warning was clear, but Emily had already made her choice. The only way out now was through, and it would cost her something she wasn't sure she was ready to lose. The final confrontation had come and gone, a whirlwind of shattered glass, broken promises, and stark revelations. The aftermath was quiet. Too quiet. Emily stood at the window of the cafe, staring out into the pale morning light. The city outside had already begun to wake up, the hum of the streets slowly filling the space with sound. But inside, it felt like everything had stopped. The weight of the last few days hung in the air, thick with tension, as if the world was holding its breath. David was gone. Sarah was safe for now. But the cost of everything that had unfolded was still too fresh, too real. Emily had helped expose the truth behind David's web of deceit, but in doing so, she had burned bridges both with him and with herself. She had acted, yes, but at what cost? She couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost something fundamental, something she would never be able to get back. The cafe was still standing, the familiar sounds of brewing coffee and quiet chatter filling the space. But for Emily, nothing felt the same. The quiet hum of the espresso machine, the simple act of making coffee, it was all she had left of the life she once knew. A small, steady knock on the door pulled Emily from her reverie. She turned, her heart skipping a beat. It was Sarah, standing in the doorway, her face guarded but resolute. "You did it," Sarah said quietly, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "You helped me. I don't know what I would have done without you." Emily nodded, her throat tight. "I didn't do it for thanks," she replied, her voice a whisper. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The silence between them spoke volumes, 1,000 unsaid words hanging in the space between them. "Where do we go from here?" Sarah asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Emily didn't answer immediately. The question, too, was a mirror of her own thoughts. Where did they go from here? How did you move forward after everything had shattered? "I don't know," Emily admitted, finally. "But we keep moving. We figure it out." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their shared experience pressed down on them both. But there was something new now, something fragile and unspoken, a kind of understanding between them. They had both been changed by what had happened. There was no going back. The days that followed were filled with the quiet rhythm of life. The cafe continued to hum with the usual bustle, the sounds of brewing coffee and casual conversations punctuating the air. But Emily could sense a shift. It wasn't just the change in her, in Sarah it was the way the world felt. A little less certain, a little less predictable. But that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The edges of life had softened, the grayness of it all becoming more bearable. Sarah had begun to rebuild her life, quietly distancing herself from the tangled mess that David had left behind. The police had taken the evidence they had uncovered, and while David's influence had not been entirely vanquished, his power had been weakened. Emily could feel it in the air, an unspoken victory, but a victory nonetheless. Yet, as much as Sarah had been saved, Emily couldn't help but wonder if she had truly been saved herself. She still stood behind the counter, still poured the same coffee, still watched the same faces come and go. But there was something more in her now, something deeper. The events had scarred her, yes, but they had also taught her something she couldn't ignore. She had chosen to step out of her safe, quiet life and face the storm head-on. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something else, something better. One morning, as the cafe's morning light spilled across the counter, Sarah walked in again. She was smiling, this time genuine, free from the weight of the past. She was beginning to find peace in the wreckage. "Coffee?" Emily asked, as she always did. Sarah nodded, settling into her usual seat. The two women shared a glance, a small, unspoken acknowledgement of everything they had been through together. There was no need for words. The connection between them spoke louder than anything either of them could say. The past had shaped them. The future was still unwritten. But in this moment, in the warmth of the cafe and the quiet simplicity of the task at hand, Emily felt something new: hope. Maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. The cafe, though unchanged in many ways, was different now. There was a weight to it, an unspoken bond between the customers and the staff, between Emily and the woman who had entered her life so unexpectedly. It was no longer just a place to grab coffee or kill time. It had become a symbol of resilience, of quiet strength in the face of uncertainty. Emily had once viewed the cafe as a haven, a simple, predictable place where she could remain unnoticed, safe within her routines. But now, it was a reminder of how far she had come, of how much she had grown. The motif of the cracked espresso cup, which had once seemed like an ordinary part of the cafe's worn-out charm, now felt significant. The crack was no longer just a flaw. It had become a symbol of transformation, of something once broken being mended. The cracks were part of the story, part of the journey. They didn't make the cup less valuable, they made it unique. As Emily poured the last cup of the day, she glanced out the window at the setting sun. The light was soft, fading into the horizon, but the colors, rich golds and deep purples, spilled across the sky, as if the world itself was painting a new beginning. The cracks in her life, in Sarah's life, in David's, the scars they carried had become part of their stories. And in this moment, Emily could see the beauty in those cracks. The future was uncertain, yes. But as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the cafe windows, Emily realized that maybe that uncertainty was the very thing that made life worth living. The final echo of everything that had happened lingered softly in the air, a quiet promise that no matter how broken, life could still be beautiful.